My name is Shreyas Girotra, and I'm a senior at Hinsdale Central High School. I'm on a mission to highlight the importance of mental health, and today we have a guest who has a powerful story to share from her journey with mental health. Heather Valentine, a first year doctoral student at Harvard University and a former member of the Mormon Church, has gained unique insights into resilience, personal growth, and navigating challenges. With that said, I'm thrilled to welcome Heather to the podcast. Let's get right into it. Before we dive into deeper topics, I'd love for the audience to get to know you a bit better. Could you please share a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, sure. So I am currently a first year doctoral student at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. I'm a solo parent of two young children, meaning like full time. I have them all the time. And I would consider myself an advocate for early childhood education in the United States. I was raised in Utah in a very high demand patriarchal religion, which that was the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And oftentimes that's more commonly known as the LDS Church, or even more commonly, they're just called the Mormons. So
Yeah.
that was my church growing up. And it's the type of religion where it's really steeped into everything that you are. It isn't just the sort of thing you go to on Sundays.
hmm
It's an entire culture and really pervasive into every element of your life. It's sort of the type of religion where you're either in or you're out.
Yeah.
You're one of us or you're not one of us. And it is a really heavy-handed approach to faith. People who decide not to participate in the church really risk being ostracized from their family and their friend groups. And I
Mm.
left when I was in my early 20s. So that's fairly significant. And then married, had my two beautiful children. And just after my second baby was born, I discovered that my husband at the time was really struggling with some pretty significant substance abuse issues that he'd been hiding fairly effectively for his whole life, particularly since I was raised in such a conservative religion. It left me really unprepared and kind of naive. So I had no
Yeah.
idea really what I was even looking at as
Yeah.
far as his addiction was concerned. So that was a journey. And we really tried our best for a couple of years after that to make it work and to get through this cycle of rehab and relapse and rehab and relapse. And then in 2020, as we all know, the pandemic hit and really I just think it became too much
Yeah.
for him, I don't want to speak for him, but seemingly too much. And he left and he told me that having a family was too stressful for him. And so
Mhm.
for the last 4.5 years, it's just been the three of us, me and the two kids.
Yeah.
Obviously, there were some really, really bleak times, especially early on, but ultimately, I think it's made our family much stronger. And the kids and I just moved across the country from Utah so that I could attend Harvard. And so we're just busy adjusting and settling in, and
Yeah.
all three of us are starting at brand new schools. So,
Yeah, that sounds great how you've been through so many highs and lows and in the end you're able to come out on top. So it's clear that you've
yeah.
had like such a diverse life experiences and I'm curious, could you tell us more about what your mental health journey has looked like through all of that?
Yeah, sure. So I, as a child, probably as a child and a young adult, I relied really heavily on external validation, meaning
Yeah.
I really needed to know I was doing the right thing from other people. I
hmm
had a hard time knowing that what I was doing was right for me, just for me, from me. That
Yeah.
was really hard for me. I needed the approval of others. I was a high achiever, got straight A's, loved to make people proud. Um, and then in addition to that, I also grew up from probably 2 years old on with a really unpredictable caregiver. Sometimes they're called explosive parents,
hmm
but that sounds like crazy. So I did have that explosive adult in my home, and so
Yeah.
I developed skills that I kind of adapted to exist in that sort of space, like learning how to walk on eggshells, trying to keep everybody happy, trying to
Yeah.
diffuse people's big emotions with like humor or fawning or just whatever I constantly was trying to manage other people's emotions rather than focusing
Hmm.
on me or my own. And then the values of the church that I was raised in and the weight that it placed on perfection really shaped who I was growing into. And I learned that if I was good enough, then I would receive love and respect. And so therefore, if I didn't receive love or respect from someone,
Hmm.
anyone, it was my own fault. I did something wrong. And so this obviously factored into my marriage later and really set me up
Hmm.
nicely for a codependent relationship with an addict. I was always trying harder to fix his problems than he was, which is really common in those relationships. And I was constantly begging to be chosen over, the other substance, the substance. And when I wasn't chosen over that, when I wasn't a good enough wife to deserve for to deserve his
Mm.
sobriety, or I wasn't a good enough friend or partner to for him to be honest with me about things, it crushed my self-worth when really that's a
Yeah.
very twisted way of thinking about an adult partnership. But I was steeped in it from childhood that, I needed
Yeah.
to earn uh, love and honesty and all of those things. And so the real work of my own mental health didn't really begin until I was definitely an adult and I started therapy, which really, I'd kind of been in and out of some therapy, but nothing too noteworthy until about 2019 when things started to
Yeah.
get really bad right before the pandemic. So I started to learn how to unpack all those messages that I'd been receiving since childhood. I started to learn different techniques to heal my nervous system. I worked through my trauma and my internal world for 4 years with my amazing therapist. Shout out to Amanda. She was literally a godsend. And while I don't, I recognize that I'll never be quote unquote done with working on myself or with therapy. Um, I definitely sit before you today a much stronger, more
Yeah.
healed version of myself than prior.
Yeah, that sounds great. And that's actually a great point, Heather. It really echoes something we've been discussing a lot, not just in the community, but also in schools as well, especially regarding that moment of external validation. I mean, I think it's also really important that when we think about ourselves or when we think about how we value our work, our progress, it's important that we find internal validation, somewhat of an internal drive
Yeah.
that kind of pushes us throughout society. And I actually see that a lot firsthand. Um, Sometimes with the students who I get on call with, I see that sometimes they feel they have to like prove themselves. And
Yes,
I see in
absolutely.
that, I see in that that's not the right thing. That's what leads to burnouts. And in order to prevent that, it's important that we find drive within ourselves. And you had also
Absolutely.
mentioned that helping others was somewhat hard, but I agree with that. I feel that because in order to help others, you need to help yourself first. So I think you really had a lot of good points there, and I'm excited to dig even deeper into that conversation. But that actually perfectly ties on to the next question. So adversity is something that we all face at different points of life, but
Sure.
resilience can look different for everyone. How have you personally built resilience through the challenges you've encountered?
That's a good question. I think that there's a little element of that we all come here with our own temperaments and personalities,
Yeah.
and some of us are more stubborn than others. And I really do have a very stubborn streak that does lend nicely to my resiliency. You tell me I can't do something and it makes me want to work harder to do it. So
Hmm.
that does factor in, when you talk about nature versus nurture. I
Hmm.
certainly was born with that sort of tenacity or grit.
Yeah.
I don't know what you want to call it, but I do think that it's a skill that everybody, you kind of have to hone it. and practice it and keep it
Yeah.
sharp and make it stronger. And we're not really taught how to do that. Um, for example, in when I left the church in my early 20s, it was really, really scary. And unless you're from that culture and that religion, it's hard to describe how it's scary or why it's scary, but you really face like your family could completely ostracize you and all of
Hmm.
your friends. Um, if I consider myself lucky because
Yeah.
my family did not do that to me, they still invited me to Sunday dinner and love me. However, having said that, there's still this understanding with the family members I have that are still in the church that they really are struggling with this grief that I've left because in their mind, I'm not going to the same heaven that they are going to. And I've sort of ruined this concept of an eternal family as it pertains to the Mormon church. And so in that, I I'm acutely aware that I've disappointed them, that I've let them down. And it was really scary for me to let my parents
Yeah.
down, right? Like I'm this people
Yeah.
pleaser. I get straight A's. Look how good I am all the time. Don't I deserve
Hmm.
love? And to do something that had such eternal consequences in their mind was really scary. And so I started to practice smaller. It's
Yeah.
like exposure therapy, right? So
Yeah.
I'd, leave my coffee pot out on the counter when they came over to the house, because when you're a Mormon, you're not supposed to drink coffee. Just little things to kind of just practice a little bit of, can I slightly disappoint you without the
Yeah.
world exploding all around me? And so slowly I just started to get better at it.
Yeah.
So I think you just kind of have to practice finding love and acceptance within yourself in these tiny little sort of boring everyday ways where you might let someone else down, but you're doing it for you and you're not causing harm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think the world didn't end. I'm still a good person. My family still loves me. And so I started to think if I can do this in this really intimate, intense part of my life and who I am, I can
Hmm.
probably bring this into the workplace and into my schooling. And like, in what ways can I be more authentically myself? And with every little bit of practice and every little bit of being more authentic, I think my resiliency grew and grew. And as much as people don't want to think about it, you do have to go through the fire to build resilience. You have to go through
Yeah.
uncomfortable things. That's what growth is. And on the other side, and when you get really good at it, you don't even have to wait till you're on the other side of it. You can kind of appreciate it while the shitty thing is happening.
Yeah.
Sorry, Shreyas, do we swear on your podcast?
No, that's fine. That's completely fine.
Okay. While this terrible thing is happening to you in your life, you can start to appreciate it for what it is. That, we can't be happy all the time. Sometimes
Yeah.
things happen and we're going to be stronger, better versions of ourselves afterward. And so
Hmm.
to kind of appreciate it just for what it is. And another key element I would say, as far as resiliency goes, is building a support system. So for me, that is my rich, amazing, dependable, unwavering friendships that I
Yeah.
have been so blessed to have throughout the years. Um, I go through hard times, but I've never had to go through them completely alone. Particularly my girlfriends. I have a very tight-knit group of the best friends who
That's great to
laugh
hear.
with me and cry with me and listen and cheer me on and threaten to beat people up in, joking ways if they need to be beat up. And that sort of support system was really important for me because I
Yeah.
didn't have that sort of built-in familial one quite as much.
Hmm.
So you can create your own, you can choose your own family to some extent.
Yeah. I agree with that. I mean, it's really cool to hear those strategies I use of, gradually pushing the boundaries, kind of reaching outside your comfort zone. And in addition to that, finding support systems within friends and peers. So clearly,
Sure.
community plays such a huge role in mental health. And I know you've had many unique experiences with support systems. So how do you think those have shaped your growth, both personally, mentally, or any other way?
That's a good question. Because the idea of support is kind of a complex thing, you know? So,
Yeah,
on one hand, I'm so grateful for the family that I have and I love them dearly. And I was fed and clothed. I had the things that I needed as a child. I was read to, encouraged. But looking back through my adult eyes, I can definitely see how much emphasis was placed inadvertently or not, whether that was their intention or not. I won't ever know. I like to assume best intentions, but the emphasis was really placed on performance. And so sometimes it felt like their love and their support was conditional. I had to
yeah,
perform for it. I can't say I ever really felt particularly safe in my own home or even that I had anyone who would protect me or that I could even look up to. So for a long time, I just kind of jumped around from thing to thing. Like, oh, so and so told me I should probably do this, so I'll do that. And then so and so
yeah,
advised me to do this, so I'll try that for a while. And it really hasn't been until recently in life that I have started to ask myself, what do I want? Um, and that's been pretty groundbreaking when you think about
yeah,
personal growth, right? You think that personal growth starts earlier than 40. Okay, right? I
yeah,
can't believe it took me this long to ask myself this question. What do I want? What do I want out of life? Um, but it's true. And so I think that also affects me as a parent now, trying to be really intentional with the support system that I'm creating for my two children. And
yeah,
is it the sort of environment that I want them to be able to thrive and grow? And am I going to be a perfect parent? No, but I'm going to try to learn from the things that could have been done a little more effectively for me.
yeah. I agree with that, and that's definitely an important question to ask yourself of what do I want? I think that really opens the door to a lot of things. I mean, that's really the key to personal growth. Just, getting inside your mind. And while that may seem easy, it's actually harder to do than it is said.
It's so
Because,
hard.
yeah, you have to know yourself, your core, your base, what is really driving you. And from that, that's the only way you can grow. You have to work from the foundation and then upwards. So,
Hmm.
yeah, and for many times, support systems can actually be many people's foundation, and support systems can grow and flow over time. They can also deviate. So, what's been a key for you in maintaining strong support even through difficult times?
Yeah, I think that those relationships are an investment. And sometimes, depending on your personality and whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, those sort of relationships are easier to maintain than others.
Yeah,
But we all have times where we just kind of get stuck in the drudgery of life and it's hard to reach out to friends and it's harder to get together, especially as you get older and you have kids and careers and but to make time to really nurture those relationships, I think is crucial.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that would probably be my advice there is to prioritize nurturing those connections. Um, Almost just right underneath nurturing your own connection with yourself,
yeah,
you know,
yeah. I
probably
agree with that.
second most important.
Yeah. And I think nurturing relationships actually that actually means a lot because if you think about it, you're somewhat of anyone as an individual is a pressure point, and you can only put on so much pressure on yourself to the point where you have to depend on your community. So having
Exactly.
a community to depend on kind of alleviates that stress. It spreads it out. And by doing that, you're able to handle more on your own while also connecting with the community, the peers around you, and that actually helps a lot. And
Oh my
for many
gosh, yes.
people, this can relate to people who are just peers or friends, but can also relate to levels of therapy, like you had mentioned before. And therapy is such a key component of support for so many people. And I've actually interviewed therapists before, understand their mindset, their drive, how they're so wholehearted, how they want to help people. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on its role in mental health and how it's impacted your own journey.
What therapy has?
Yeah,
Oh man. I say all the time that my therapist saved my life. She really did. That's not hyperbole. I think Therapy is so, so crucial. And I love how you think of it as part of being part of the support system. That's a really holistic way about thinking about health in general. I love that.
Yeah.
Um, I personally would love to see therapy treated like your, biannual dental cleaning. Like you're just
Yeah.
expected to go, insurance covers it. You go once a
Hmm.
month at least, and it's just like a checkup, even if
Yeah.
things are good. Well, have you had therapy this month? More
Yeah.
often if you need it. But I think that that would be really important, honestly. It's sad to me that I and so many other people had to get to a point where I felt like my life was falling apart to be able to realize I needed to reach out and access some of those services.
Hmm.
It shouldn't have to get to that point because the skills that I was learning, the deep learning that I was doing about myself as a human being, and the skills that I learned as far as, regulating my own emotions and some coping strategies and things like that, those would be helpful for anybody at any time.
Yeah.
And why, we only get access to them just because of the way the system is structured when we're really in sort of like acute crisis most of
Yeah.
the time is wild to me. And so if we just had if therapy was just an everyday part of our life, I just can't imagine how much better of a place this world would be for all of us to exist in.
Yeah.
It would be so great.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, definitely the idea of that everybody needs to talk. Um, and it's also a matter of preventative because
Yeah.
it's better to like have an approach to the situation, have a securative measure before having to go through all the stress. And that's what I've been hearing online as well, that there's a growing belief that therapy is really valuable for everyone, not just those in crisis.
Yeah.
So, why do you think it's important for people from all walks of life to really consider therapy, consider outreach, and, developing that bond?
Yeah, I agree with you. It definitely has experienced a shift, even in the last 10 to 20 years, the view of therapy. I will say, I think this is just the world according to Heather, right? Like, this is just my own opinion.
Yeah.
I think particularly boys and men would benefit a lot from receiving therapy just as like a regular part of their lives.
Yeah.
Um, I think some of the messages that we send to boys really early on, they carry with them throughout their whole life, and then
Yeah.
inadvertently sort of like shoot those barbed wires out at everyone around them who are closest to them and love them the
Hmm.
most as an
Yeah.
adult in life. And so I honestly think that it isn't. Sure, it's great for the individual, it's great for the person, but therapy should be viewed as a community resource and for the betterment of community because we all exist in this interpersonal realm. We all
Yeah.
have to interact with each other. And I just wonder sometimes what the world would be like if we all knew ourselves, knew
Yeah.
our triggers, could put some space in between stimulus and response, just had some of the skills that I've learned in therapy so far and so many other people have too. And then the healing of the nervous system,
Yeah.
understanding that we're basically like this electrical system in a meat suit. That's like our human body, and that
Yeah.
the electrical system has to get soothed and reset and reprogrammed sometimes, and
Yeah.
that takes work. I just can't imagine the impact that would have on the community around us if we all were walking around responding from that place instead of a reactive, traumatized space. It would be
Yeah.
pretty incredible.
That's actually a really insightful perspective. And I actually hear that a lot in the community today with people saying, "Oh, I need to recharge my social battery," and just having like
Yeah.
a downtime for yourself. So that's actually pretty funny because that actually connects a lot to me and what I've heard around me too. Um, but in terms of that, I think everyone does have that potential for learning inside of them. And it's important to acknowledge that and take time out for that within your personal life, making somewhat of a slot in your schedule, whether that be every day, once a week, or
Yes.
just having time with your friends to recharge, reset, appreciate yourself. Um, from that, zooming out, you've made some bold moves in your life. So, what was the driving force that motivated you to take those next big steps?
Well, I think two things come to mind. First is just alignment. I've always had a lot of discomfort when my choices don't align with my values. And so if I value something and my choice goes against that value, it's really uncomfortable. And so I'd much rather do something which, like, I know it sounds cliche, but it's like the no regrets thing.
Yeah,
I think about my funeral a lot. I think about when people come to my funeral and people are speaking, what are they going to say? What stories are they going to tell? How are they going to say I made them feel? What adventures are they going to talk about and reminisce about that we had
yeah,
together? And I know that when, they say when people are on their deathbed, their biggest regrets are the things that they didn't do,
yeah,
not the things that they did do. And so I
mhm,
think about my funeral a lot. And I think it helps bring me into the moment and be really mindful of what choices I'm making. And generally, if it's good for the plot, I'm going to do it. If it's going
yeah,
to have be a story that someone wants to tell at my funeral, I'm going to at least try and say yes. Like when one of your besties says, "Hey, you really should apply to Harvard." And I'm like, "No, that's crazy. Okay, I'm in." And then,
yeah,
oh my God, I got in. You know what I mean? Like you
yeah.
got to do things for the plot sometimes. Um, yeah.
I agree with that. Because as a senior in high school right now, I can actually relate with that a lot. Just, shooting all the shots you can, increasing the
Yeah.
probability. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a strategy for me as well. Just pushing yourself out of the comfort zone, doing as much as you can right now so that you can live a better life going forward. Um,
Exactly.
and a lot of people actually hesitate to leave their comfort zone. But what advice would you give to someone who's feeling that fear, but knows that they need to make a change?
That's a good question. So, yes, our comfort zone feels really nice and it's there for a reason. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think about it in my field in early childhood, we talk a lot about, the theory of attachment and what really small children do when they are, let's say they're at the playground and they're maybe 3 years old going out to explore something on the playground alone, and then they realize they've been away from their parent, from, let's say their mom, for too long. So they look for her and they see her, and maybe they go over and like touch her knee a little. And then they're like, okay, all is right in the world. And then they go back and explore some
Yeah.
more. And it's sort of this cycle of just checking in and then going out and exploring and checking in and going out and exploring. And
Yeah.
that to me feels like what's worked best for me as far as leaving my comfort zone. Because being in your comfort zone is not a bad thing. You've
Yeah.
got to spend some time there. You have to rest, you have to recharge, and you have to enjoy the fruits of your labor. You work really
Hmm.
hard for something, enjoy it for a while, sit with it for a
Agreed.
while. But then when you start to feel stagnant or a little bored, or, someone suggests something crazy like applying to Harvard, then it's probably time to do something just a little scary. I think I used to have a saying that I wanted to do something scary every day.
Hmm.
Every day turned out to be way too often for my nervous system and my comfort zone. So regularly, though, do something scary. I
Yeah.
think just finding that right balance of where you can be right on the cusp of what's just the right amount of uncomfortable, and then kind of going back and checking in with the familiar, but then venturing out a little further again and kind of doing something a little braver than what you did last time. And you
Yeah.
just keep growing and you keep growing and you keep learning to trust yourself.
Yeah. There's a healthy medium to it all. I mean, it's just a
Mhm.
cycle, just going up and down and, just trying to expand that medium. It's kind of like a
Yeah.
plateau, matter of fact. So, what do you think a mental plateau means to you?
Mm. Um, so what it usually means, what it shows up at as for me is complacency. and I kind of get disengaged. And that might be at a job where maybe I really enjoyed the job for a long time. I was connected to the work and I love the coworkers. Um, but for whatever reason, it's just no longer lighting me up. It isn't
Hmm.
as engaging as it used to be. You're just kind of missing that growth factor.
Yeah.
And so it shows up for me as being a little disengaged, um, kind of floating through things aimlessly without a direction. It kind of looks like that. And so that's when I know that it's time to do something different. And I say
Yeah.
to myself all the time that nothing is going to change unless something changes. And so you can't just daydream in your mind about what you want all day. You have to actually take action.
Yeah.
And depending on what kind of plateau you're experiencing, that will kind of determine what action is warranted.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. That's the definition of how we define it here. I mean, it's really just being able to get over it. And from listening about how others get over it, we're also able to take that in ourselves and adapt to those new learning blocks and use them. How can we get over our own obstacles by hearing about how others get over theirs? So,
Mm,
what's one key piece of advice you wish you had heard earlier in your mental health journey, especially for those who were working to overcome their own mental plateaus?
mm. Um, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out like what people were trustworthy in my
Yeah,
life and who I could trust. And what I wish I would have done earlier, if I could go back in time as myself now and tell myself then, it would be to spend that time instead learning how to trust myself.
yeah,
And not in like a hyper independent way where you don't have connections with anyone because you can't trust anyone. It's not that. It's yeah, people are probably going to let you down in some way or another. Life's going to throw you curveballs and you're going to be okay because of yourself, not
yeah,
because you depend on people around you. They're an important ingredient, but learning how to trust myself has been probably the biggest piece of my healing journey and what I wish I would have started working on way, way, way sooner.
yeah. That's definitely a great piece of advice. I mean,
Yeah, I
again,
remember,
yeah, go on.
sorry, go ahead.
No, you first.
I remember someone telling me once, um, I think it was like an Instagram meme or something like that, but they had seen something that said, the bird doesn't worry that the branch beneath her is going to break because
Yeah,
she trusts her own wings. And that kind of encapsulates that for me, that idea.
yeah. That encapsulates it really well. I actually like that saying a lot. I mean, that reflects on what we've been talking for basically the whole entire time, that it's just self-trust. From self-trust, we're
Yep.
able to trust others and further branch out from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great insight. I learned so much today, and I'm really grateful. Um, Heather, I can't thank you enough for sharing your time and your insights with both me and the audience today. I mean, your story will undoubtedly resonate with listeners all around the platform, all around the world. And I think it'll remind them that they're not alone in the challenges they face, that support's always within reach, and everyone needs to look inward first before looking outward. So I truly
Yes.
enjoyed our discussion. I found your ideas very inspiring, deeply inspiring. And voices like yours help advance the mission of not only Mental Plateau, but also organizations like Humanity Rising. And as we continue working towards creating a positive change in the environment around us through service and raising awareness about mental health, it's important that we also take the community into vision. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
once again, Heather,
Yes.
thank you so much for your time.
Thank
And
you. It was a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you for having
same,
me.
same. Remember to stay healthy as a whole because mental wellness plays a role.